The jungle of Seven was alive with sounds that Lucy Grant had never heard on Earth. Strange birds called from trees that stretched hundreds of feet into the purple sky. Insects the size of her fist buzzed past her head as she pushed through the thick vegetation. She had been on this planet for 6 months now, and she still felt like a stranger in a world that did not want her. Lucy was which meant she studied alien life forms. She worked at Outpost, a small human research station on the edge of territory. They were the dominant species on Seven. They were serpentine creatures, covered in scales that shifted color with their moods. They stood on 2 legs but had long tails and arms that ended in claws sharp enough to cut through metal. The galaxy knew them as apex predators. They had never lost a war. They had never shown mercy to their enemies. The humans were allowed to stay on Seven only because of a fragile diplomatic agreement. They did not trust humans, but they were curious about them. So they permitted the small outpost to exist, as long as the humans stayed within their boundaries. Lucy knew the rules. She had signed documents promising to respect them. But today, like many days before, she had wandered too close to the restricted zone while collecting plant samples. She told herself she would turn back soon. She always told herself that. But the jungle on the other side of the boundary was so much more interesting. The plants there had properties she had never seen before. The animals moved in ways that her understanding of biology. She was a scientist, and her curiosity was stronger than her fear. That was when she heard the sound. It was high-pitched and desperate. It cut through the noise of the jungle like a knife. Lucy froze, her hand still reaching for a bright orange flower. The sound came again. It was not the call of a bird or the cry of an insect. It was something else, something in distress. Lucy knew she should turn back. She knew that crossing the boundary could mean her death. But the sound pulled at something deep inside her. It reminded her of something she had tried to forget, a memory she had buried under years of work and distance. She crossed the boundary. The jungle grew thicker as she moved toward the sound. Vines hung from every branch, creating curtains of green that she had to push through with both hands. The air was heavier here, filled with the smell of rotting leaves and strange flowers. She followed the cries until she reached a small clearing. There, tangled in a mass of fallen vines, was a juvenile. Lucy stopped breathing. She had seen adult before from a distance. They were terrifying. But this one was small, no bigger than a large dog. Its scales were a soft blue color, not yet hardened into the darker shades of adulthood. Its eyes were wide and frightened, and its small body twisted as it tried to free itself from the vines that held it tight. The cub saw her. It went completely still. Its vertical pupils focused on her face, and Lucy could see the fear in them. But there was something else too, something that looked almost like hope. Lucy knew the stories. They were fiercely protective of their young. No alien had ever touched a cub and lived to tell about it. If she helped this creature and an adult found her, she would die. There would be no trial, no explanation, no mercy. They did not believe in such things. But if she left, the cub would die. The vines were too tight. It could not free itself. And night was coming. The predators that hunted in the darkness of Seven were not picky about what they ate. Lucy thought about her brother. Danny had been small too, and helpless in his own way. He had been born with a heart that did not work right. He could not run or play like other children. He spent most of his life in hospitals, connected to machines that kept him alive. Lucy had been the one who sat with him through the long nights. She had been the one who carried him on her back to see the ocean just once before he died. She had come to Seven to escape that pain. She had traveled across the galaxy to find a place where she did not have to feel anything. But standing in that clearing, looking at the frightened cub, she felt everything come rushing back. She could not walk away. Lucy moved slowly, keeping her hands where the cub could see them. She spoke in a soft voice, using words the creature could not understand, but hopping the tone would calm it. The cub watched her with those strange vertical eyes, its body tense and ready to fight if it could. The vines were thick and strong, but Lucy had a cutting tool on her belt. She worked carefully, slicing through each vine one at a time. The cub flinched every time the tool came close to its scales, but it did not try to bite her. It seemed to understand that she was trying to help. It took her almost 20 minutes to free the creature. When the last vine fell away, the cub scrambled backward, putting distance between them. Lucy sat back on her heels and waited. She did not try to chase it or grab it. She just sat there, showing the cub that she meant no harm. For a long moment, nothing happened. The jungle sounds filled the silence between them. Then slowly, the cub moved toward her. It stretched its neck forward, sniffing the air around her. Its forked tongue flicked out, tasting her scent. Lucy held perfectly still. The cub touched her hand with its nose. Its scales were cool and smooth, like polished stone. Lucy let out the breath she had been holding. And then she heard the sound that turned her blood to ice. It was a low, resonant call that echoed through the jungle. It was followed by another and then another. The calls were coming from different directions, surrounding the clearing. Lucy knew what they were. She had heard recordings of them in her training. Adult hunting calls. They were searching for the cub, and they were close. Lucy looked at the small creature beside her. It had not responded to the calls. It stayed close to her, pressing against her leg as if seeking comfort. She did not know why it was not calling back to its own kind. She did not know why it seemed to trust her more than them. But she knew one thing for certain. If they found her here with their cub, she was dead. The cub looked up at her with those strange, beautiful eyes. It made a small sound, soft and questioning. Not a threat, a plea. Lucy reached down and picked it up. The cub did not struggle. It wrapped its small body around her arm and held on tight. She ran. Lucy ran through the jungle with the cub clinging to her arm. Branches whipped against her face and vines grabbed at her legs, but she did not stop. The hunting calls of the adult echoed behind her, growing louder with every passing minute. They were fast, much faster than any human could ever be. She knew she could not outrun them forever. The cub held on tight, its small claws digging into her sleeve but not breaking her skin. It seemed to understand that they were in danger. Its body was pressed flat against her arm, making itself as small as possible. Lucy could feel its rapid heartbeat against her wrist. She did not know where she was going. The boundary was somewhere to her left, but in her panic she had lost her sense of direction. The trees all looked the same. The purple light of the fatting sun made everything look strange and unfamiliar. She was lost in a jungle that wanted to kill her, carrying a creature whose family wanted to kill her even more. Her communicator buzzed against her hip. She ignored it at first, focused only on running, but it buzzed again and then again. Finally, she pulled it out without stopping. "Grant, where are you?" The voice belonged to Commander Pete, the head of Outpost. He was a serious man in his 50s who followed every rule without question. "Your tracker shows you outside the boundary zone." Lucy ducked under a low branch and kept running. "I am fine," she said, trying to control her breathing. "Just collecting samples. I will be back soon." "Your tracker says you are half a mile into territory." His voice was sharp with worry. "Get back here now. That is an order." "I am on my way," Lucy lied. She ended the call before he could ask more questions. The hunting calls had stopped. That was worse than hearing them. When they went silent, it meant they had found their target. It meant they were closing in for the kill. Lucy spotted a massive tree with a hollow opening at its base. Without thinking, she dove inside, pulling the cub close to her chest. The space was small and dark, smelling of damp earth and rotting wood. She pressed her back against the inner wall and tried to slow her breathing. The cub made a soft sound against her chest. Lucy put her hand over its mouth, gently, not wanting to hurt it. "Quiet," she whispered. "Please be quiet." The cub seemed to understand. It went still in her arms, its breathing matching hers. Minutes passed. They felt like hours. Lucy heard movement outside the tree, the soft sound of scales sliding over leaves. A shadow passed across the entrance to the hollow. She closed her eyes and prayed to whatever gods existed in this part of the galaxy. The shadow moved on. The sounds faded. The hunters had missed them. Lucy did not move for a long time. She stayed in that hollow until the purple sky outside turned black and the strange stars of seven began to shine through the canopy. Only then did she allow herself to breathe normally. The cub stirred in her arms. It looked up at her with those vertical eyes, and for a moment, Lucy saw something that looked like gratitude. Then it began to explore her, moving up her arm with careful, curious movements. Its small body coiled around her forearm as it climbed, testing its grip on this strange new creature. Lucy watched it with a mix of fear and wonder. She had studied many alien species in her career, but she had never been this close to she had never touched one, never felt the cool smoothness of their scales. The scientists back on Earth would give anything for this experience. They would write papers about it. They would win awards. All Lucy could think about was how small and vulnerable the cub seemed. She noticed something as the cub explored her arm. Its mouth opened slightly, and she saw that its teeth were small and blunt, not sharp like the adults she had seen. And there was something else missing. The small openings on either side of its mouth, where venom glands should be, were sealed over with smooth scales. The cub had no venom. Lucy understood then why the adults had been hunting, not searching. Among the venom was everything. It was their weapon, their defense, their mark of worth. A born without venom glands was considered defective, useless. Such cubs were cast out to die. The hunting calls had not been a search for a lost child. They had been a death sentence being carried out. Lucy felt anger rise in her chest, hot and sharp. She thought of her brother Danny, who had been born different, who had been considered weak by everyone except her. She thought of how the other kids had avoided him, how the adults had looked at him with pity, how the world had told him in 1,000 small ways that he did not matter. Danny had mattered. He had mattered more than anyone. "I will not let them have you," Lucy whispered to the cub. "I do not care what they think you are worth. I know better." The cub had stopped climbing. Halfway up her arm, it had found a comfortable position and settled there. Its eyes were closing, its body relaxing against her warmth. The day had been long and frightening, and the small creature was exhausted. Lucy watched as the cub fell asleep on her arm, its small body coiled around her like a bracelet. Something shifted inside her chest, a feeling she had not allowed herself to have since Danny died, a feeling of purpose, of protection, of love. She had come to Seven to run away from pain. She had traveled across the stars to find a place where nothing could hurt her. But sitting in that hollow tree, with a sleeping predator cub wrapped around her arm, she realized that she had been wrong. You could not run from pain. You could only choose what you were willing to suffer for. Lucy decided then that she was willing to suffer for this small, helpless creature that the galaxy had thrown away. She would get it back to the outpost. She would find a way to keep it safe. She would fight her own people, fight anyone who tried to hurt it. But first, she had to survive the night. The jungle of Seven was full of dangers that came out after dark. Lucy could hear them moving through the trees, hunting for prey. She stayed in the hollow, keeping the cub warm against her body, watching the entrance for any sign of threat. The night was long and cold and full of fear, but Lucy did not sleep. She kept watch over the small life that depended on her, just as she had once kept watch over her brother in those hospital rooms. When the first light of dawn touched the sky, Lucy stood up on stiff legs and began the journey back to human territory. The cub woke and looked around with curious eyes, then settled back onto her arm as if that was where it had always belonged. Lucy did not know what waited for her at the outpost. She did not know if Commander would help her or hand her over to the. She did not know if she could save this cub or if trying would cost her everything. But she knew she had to try. She stepped out of the hollow and into the purple light of morning, carrying the cub that the galaxy had rejected, but she had chosen to love. The journey back toward human territory was slow and dangerous. Lucy moved carefully through the jungle, stopping often to listen for any sign of patrols. The cub stayed close to her, sometimes riding on her arm and sometimes walking beside her on its small legs. It seemed to understand that they needed to be quiet, and it made no sounds except for soft breathing. Lucy had started calling the cub Coil in her mind. She did not know if it was male or female, and she did not know what name its own kind might have given it. But as it wrapped around her arm again and again throughout the long morning, the name seemed right. Coil was curious about everything. When Lucy stopped to rest, the cub explored the ground around her, sniffing at plants and chasing small insects that crawled through the leaves. It brought her a bright blue flower, dropping it in her lap and looking up at her with eyes that seemed to ask for approval. Lucy smiled and tucked the flower behind her ear. "Thank you," she said softly. "It is beautiful." Coil made a small chirping sound that might have been happiness. They walked for hours through the thick jungle. Lucy's legs ached and her stomach growled with hunger, but she did not stop except to drink from a small stream they crossed. She let Coil drink too, watching as the cub lapped at the water with its forked tongue. Even something as simple as drinking was different for them. Everything about them was alien, built for a world that humans could never truly understand. And yet, watching Coil splash in the shallow water, Lucy saw something familiar. She saw the same joy that any young creature felt when playing. She saw the same curiosity, the same innocence, the same need for comfort and safety. Coil might have been born on a different world, might have been a species that the galaxy feared, but underneath all of that, it was just a child. A child that no one else wanted. Lucy thought about the who had cast Coil out. She tried to understand them, to see things from their point of view. Their species had survived for thousands of years because they were strong. Weakness was death in the jungle of 7. A cub without venom could not hunt, could not defend itself, could not contribute to the survival of its family. In their eyes, keeping such a cub alive would be cruel. But Lucy could not accept that. She had grown up on Earth, where humans had learned a different lesson. They had learned that caring for the weak did not make a society weaker. It made it stronger. It gave people something to fight for beyond their own survival. It created bonds that could not be broken. Her brother Danny had taught her that. He had never been able to run or play sports or do any of the things that other children did. But he had been kind. He had been funny. He had made everyone around him smile, even on the hardest days. When he died, the hospital was filled with people who came to say goodbye. Doctors and nurses who had cared for him for years. Children from the ward who had become his friends. Even the cleaning staff who had stopped to talk to him during their shifts. Danny had touched more lives in his short years than most people touched in a lifetime. Not because he was strong, but because he was good. Lucy wiped tears from her eyes and kept walking. By midday, she was close to the boundary. She could see the markers that the human team had placed to show where territory ended. Just a few more minutes and she would be safe, or at least safer than she was now. That was when she heard the voices. They were speaking in the language, a series of hisses and clicks that Lucy could not understand. But she recognized the tone. It was the tone of hunters who had found their prey. 3 adults stepped out of the jungle ahead of her. They were tall, nearly 8 feet each, with scales that shifted between dark green and black. Their eyes were cold and their claws were extended. The one in the center had ceremonial scars across its face, marking it as a leader of some kind. It looked at Lucy with an expression that might have been curiosity or might have been contempt. Lucy froze, Coil pressed against her leg, trembling. The leader spoke in broken common, the shared language of the galaxy. "Human," it said, "you carry our weak. Why do you not leave it to die?" Lucy's heart was pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. Her hands were shaking and her legs wanted to run, but she forced herself to stand still. She forced herself to meet the leader's eyes. "Because where I come from," she said, "we do not abandon our weak, we carry them." The leader tilted its head, a gesture that might have meant surprise. "Your kind keeps the broken ones alive. This makes you weaker. The broken consume resources. They cannot hunt. They cannot fight. They are nothing." "They are everything," Lucy said. Her voice was stronger now, fed by anger and grief and love all mixed together. "The ones you call broken teach us how to be gentle. They teach us how to love without expecting anything back. They make us better than we would be without them." The leader hissed, a sound of disbelief. "Words of a soft species. Your kind has no claws, no venom, no scales. You are prey in every jungle of the galaxy. How have you survived?" Lucy looked down at Coil, who was watching her with those trusting eyes. Then she looked back at the leader. "We survived because we carry each other," she said. "When one of us falls, the others pick them up. When one of us is weak, the others are strong for them. You see this as soft. We see it as the hardest thing in the universe. It is easy to abandon the ones who cannot keep up. It takes real strength to slow down and bring them with you." The leader was silent for a long moment. The other two shifted behind it, their claws still extended, waiting for an order. Then the leader did something that Lucy did not expect. It lowered its head, a gesture of respect that she had read about but never seen. "You speak strange truths, human," the leader said. "I do not understand your ways, but I see that you believe them. You would die for this broken cub." "Yes," Lucy said simply, "I would." The leader studied her for another long moment. Then it turned to the other and spoke rapidly in their own language. Lucy could not understand the words, but she could see the shock on the faces of the other two. One of them hissed in protest, but the leader silenced it with a sharp gesture. When the leader turned back to Lucy, its expression had changed. There was something almost sad in its eyes. "Take the cub and go," it said. "Leave our territory and do not return. I cannot protect you from all of my kind. There are many who would kill you for what you have done. But today I choose to let you live. Today I choose to see what you see." Lucy did not wait to be told twice. She picked up Coil and held the cub close to her chest. Then she ran toward the boundary, toward human territory, toward safety. Behind her, she heard the leader speak one more time, its voice carrying through the jungle. "Strange creatures, these humans. Perhaps we have much to learn from prey." Lucy crossed into human territory with Coil pressed against her chest. Her legs were shaking from exhaustion and fear, but she did not stop until she had put a good distance between herself and the boundary. Only then did she allow herself to fall to her knees and catch her breath. Coil climbed out of her arms and sat beside her, watching her with concerned eyes. The cub made a soft chirping sound and pressed its nose against her cheek. Lucy laughed despite everything, despite the terror of the past day and night, despite the knowledge that her troubles were far from over. "I am okay," she told the cub. "We are okay." But she knew that was not entirely true. She had broken the most important rule of the outpost. She had crossed into territory without permission. She had taken one of their young, even if that young one had been cast out to die. When she returned to outpost, there would be consequences. Commander would be furious. The diplomatic agreement with the could be destroyed. Everything the humans had worked for on Seven could fall apart because of what she had done. Lucy looked at Coil, who was now chasing a small flying insect through the grass. The cub pounced and missed, tumbling over its own tail, then got up and tried again. It was so innocent, so unaware of the storm that was coming. She could not regret saving it. No matter what happened next, she could not regret that choice. Lucy stood up and began walking toward the outpost. It took her another 2 hours to reach it, moving slowly because her body was tired and because she was not ready to face what waited for her. But eventually, the metal walls of outpost appeared through the trees, and she had no choice but to go forward. The guard at the gate stared at her with wide eyes. Then he stared at Coil, who was riding on her shoulder like a strange feathered scarf. His hand moved toward his weapon. "Do not," Lucy said firmly. "It is just a cub. It will not hurt anyone." The guard did not look convinced, but he lowered his hand and called for Commander on his communicator. Arrived within minutes. He was a tall man with gray hair and a face that rarely showed emotion. But when he saw Coil wrapped around Lucy's arm, his expression shifted to something between horror and disbelief. "Grant," he said slowly, "what have you done?" "I saved a life," Lucy said. "That is what I have done." Looked at the cub for a long moment. Then he looked at Lucy, and she saw something in his eyes that might have been sympathy, or might have been pity. "Come inside," he said. "We need to talk." They went to his office, a small room filled with screens and reports and the weight of responsibility. Lucy sat in a chair across from his desk, with Coil curled in her lap. The cub had fallen asleep again, exhausted from the long journey. Listened as Lucy told him everything: the sounds in the jungle, the trapped cub, the discovery that Coil had no venom glands, the hunting calls of the adults, the night in the hollow tree, the confrontation with the patrol and the strange mercy of their leader. When she finished, was silent for a long time. He stared at his desk, his fingers pressed together in front of his face. "You know what this means," he said finally. "Though we'll not all agree with what that patrol leader did. There will be others who see this as a violation of our agreement. They could demand your death. They could demand we leave the planet entirely." "I know," Lucy said. "And you did it anyway." "Yes." Looked at her, and for the first time since she had known him, she saw something like respect in his eyes. "Why?" Lucy thought about the question. She thought about her brother and the ocean and the way he had smiled when he saw the waves for the first time. She thought about all the people who had told her she was wasting her time caring for someone who would never be normal. She thought about how wrong they had been. "Because some things are worth more than safety," she said. "Some things are worth more than rules. I looked at this cub and I saw something that deserved to live. I could not walk away from that. I would not be able to live with myself if I had." Nodded slowly. "I have a daughter," he said quietly. "She was born with problems. The doctors said she would never walk, never talk, never live a normal life. They were wrong about most of it. She walks now. She talks. She is studying to be a doctor herself." He paused. "I understand what you are saying, Grant, more than you know." Lucy felt tears prick at her eyes. She had expected anger. She had expected to be arrested or confined to quarters or sent back to Earth in disgrace. She had not expected this. "What happens now?" she asked. Before could answer, an alarm began to sound throughout the outpost. Red lights flashed on the walls. A voice came over the speakers, calm but urgent. "Forces approaching the perimeter. All personnel to defensive positions." Stood up, his face grim. "It seems we are about to find out." Lucy held Coil close as they hurried to the command center. Through the large windows, she could see them coming. Dozens of, emerging from the jungle like shadows made solid. Their scales caught the light of the setting sun, shifting through colors of anger and aggression. They moved in perfect formation, a hunting party larger than any Lucy had seen before. At the front of the group, she recognized the leader from the jungle, the one with the ceremonial scars, but now she could see wounds on its body, fresh cuts that had not been there before. It had been attacked, punished for letting her go. They stopped at the edge of the perimeter, just outside the boundary that marked human territory. They did not cross, not yet. Lucy looked at the cub in her arms, then at the army that had come for it. She knew what she had to do. "I have to go out there," she said. Grabbed her arm. "That is suicide." "Maybe," Lucy said. "But if I do not, they will attack the outpost. People will die. I started this. I have to finish it." She pulled free from his grip and walked toward the door. Coil chirped in confusion, sensing her fear. Lucy stroked its head gently. "It is okay," she whispered. I will not let them hurt you, I promise." She stepped outside into the fatting light and began walking toward the army alone. Lucy walked across the open ground between the outpost and the army. The distance felt like miles, though it was only a few hundred feet. With every step, she expected to feel claws tearing through her back or venom burning through her veins. But she kept walking. She kept her eyes forward and her arms wrapped around Coil. The cub was trembling against her chest. It could sense the danger, could smell its own kind gathered in numbers meant for war. But it did not try to escape from Lucy's arms. It stayed with her, trusting her completely, even though she was leading it toward the creatures that had wanted it dead. Lucy stopped 10 feet from the front line of the army. Up close, they were terrifying. Dozens of predators, each one taller and stronger and deadlier than any human could ever be. Their eyes reflected the last light of the sun like burning coals. Their claws gleamed with a sharpness that could cut through steel. The leader with the ceremonial scars stepped forward. Lucy could see the wounds more clearly now. Deep cuts across its chest and arms, still bleeding slightly. It had been attacked by its own kind for the mercy it had shown her in the jungle. "Human," the leader said. Its voice was tired but steady. "You should not have come back." "I had to," Lucy said. "I will not hide behind walls while others fight for my choices. If you have come for the cub, you will have to take it from me." A murmur ran through the ranks. Lucy could not understand their language, but she could hear the surprise in their voices. No prey had ever spoken to them like this. No human had ever stood before their army and refused to run. Another pushed forward through the crowd. This one was larger than the others, with scales so dark they were almost black. Its eyes were filled with cold hatred, and when it spoke, its voice was like grinding stone. "This creature dares to keep what we have cast out," it said. "This prey thinks it can tell us what our young are worth. Kill it. Kill them both." Several moved forward, their claws raised. But the leader stepped between them and Lucy, its arms spread wide. "No," it said, "I will not allow this." The dark hissed with rage. "You have no authority here. You were stripped of your rank for helping this human escape. You are nothing now." "I am still," the leader said, "and I invoke the ancient law, the law of proven guardians." The army went silent. Even the Dark One stopped moving, its eyes widening with surprise. Lucy did not know what this law meant, but she could see that it mattered. They were looking at their leader with expressions that might have been shock or might have been respect. The leader turned to Lucy. "Long ago," it explained, "when our species was young, we had a law for rare situations. If a cub was cast out and another being proved willing to die for that cub, guardianship could be transferred. The new guardian would be responsible for the cub forever. They would raise it as their own." It paused. "No alien has ever claimed this right, but the law does not say they cannot." Lucy understood. "You are saying I can keep Coil legally, under your own laws." "If you accept the responsibility," the leader said. "If you swear to protect this cub until your last breath, then even those who disagree with me cannot touch you. The ancient law is sacred. It cannot be broken." The Dark let out a roar of anger. "This is madness. We cannot give our young to prey. We cannot let a human raise one of us." "The law is clear," the leader said calmly. "The human has proved her worth. She crossed into our territory to save the cub. She faced our hunters alone. She returned here knowing we might kill her, but she came anyway. She has done more for this cub than any of us. The law recognizes that." Lucy looked down at Coil, who was watching everything with wide, curious eyes. The cub chirped softly and pressed its nose against her chin. "I accept," Lucy said loudly so that all could hear. "I accept guardianship of this cub. I swear to protect it. I swear to raise it with love. I swear to be its family when no one else would." The leader nodded once, then turned to face the army. "It is done," it announced. "Under the ancient law, this human is now guardian to the cub called Venomless. Any who harm her harm a keeper of young. Any who harm the cub break our most sacred traditions." The Dark One hissed again, but it stepped back. The other lowered their claws. Slowly, reluctantly, the army began to disperse back into the jungle. They did not like what had happened. They did not understand it, but they would not break the ancient law. Only the leader remained. It approached Lucy and looked down at Coil with an expression that was difficult to read. "Raise it well, human," it said. "Teach it your strange ways. Perhaps it will be the bridge between our peoples. Perhaps it will show us things we have forgotten." "I will," Lucy promised. "Thank you for giving us this chance." The leader turned and walked back toward the jungle. At the edge of the trees, it paused and looked back. "My name is," it said. "If you ever need help, call for me. I will come." Then it disappeared into the jungle, and Lucy was alone with Coil. Months passed. Lucy stayed on 7, but her role changed. She was no longer just a researcher. She was an ambassador, the first human to be recognized under law as a guardian of their young. Others came to the outpost, curious about the human who had their traditions and won. Young ones especially, drawn by stories of the strange, soft creature who had carried a broken cub to safety. Coil grew quickly. Within a year, the cub was nearly as tall as Lucy, though it still liked to wrap around her arm when it slept. It could not produce venom, but it learned other skills. It learned to communicate in both and human languages. It learned to build and create and think in ways that its own kind had never considered. It became something new, something that had never existed before. And slowly they began to change. Visited often, asking questions about human ways, other leaders followed. They learned that caring for the weak did not make a society weaker. They learned that there was strength in compassion, power in gentleness. They began to see their own cast-out cubs differently. On the anniversary of the day Lucy had found Coil in the jungle, she sat outside the outpost and watched the sunset paint the sky in shades of purple and gold. Coil sat beside her, its grown body curved around her protectively. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you had left me in those vines?" Coil asked. Its voice was soft and thoughtful, a mix of hisses and human words. Lucy smiled and leaned against her adopted child. "No," she said, "I never wonder, because I know I never could have left you. From the moment I saw you, you were mine." Coil wrapped around her arm just like it had that first night in the jungle. It was much bigger now, but the gesture was the same. Trust, love, family. The galaxy had always feared humans because they came from a death world, because they were survivors, because they would not give up. But Lucy had shown them something else. She had shown them that humans did not just survive. They carried each other. And sometimes they carried others too. In the purple light of 7, a human and a watched the stars come out together. They were an unlikely family, born from mercy and stubbornness and love. They were proof that the universe could still surprise itself. They were home,